his relationship with that country very strong, visiting there again later this month.
OK, Amanda, thank you very much.
And joining us now on Skype from Busan in South Korea is Dr. Robert Kelly. He's Professor of International Relations at Busan National University. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Kelly. How much of a crisis do you think this current situation is?
The Kaesong closure is a significant step forward because it is a nice source of cheap cash dollars, specifically for the North Korean regime. North Korea has a lot of trouble raising foreign currency, as you might imagine. And so closing Kaesong, which nets them something like $500 million a year, is significant. People did not expect that. The North Koreans were taunted by the South Korean press about that, which is one of the reasons why I think they did it.
But why would they do it? Because, as you say, they're cutting off their nose to spite their face.
Right, yeah, that's the whole point, and that's what people are actually wondering about. I mean, the last time I sort of did an interview similar to this, I said that if they close Kaesong, it's a big thing. We should sort of pay attention to it. But I do have the feeling that they were goaded into this to a certain extent because, particularly in South Korea, the media was saying, you know, if North Korea is really serious, they're actually going to do something instead of just talk. And closing Kaesong would be that because they make money, and no one thought they would do it, and they did it, which is why everyone's taking it so seriously.
You say they were goaded, but of course it was the North Koreans who started making nuclear threats and declaring war.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I would certainly agree with that. I mean, this crisis has really been driven by the North Korean nuclear test earlier in the year, and everything has sort of spiraled forward from that. I don't actually think this is really being driven by the Americans or the South Koreans. This is about North Korean regime security. The regime needs to look strong in front of its own people. It needs to explain why North Korea still exists as a separate, poor Korean state. And one reason is because there's constant tension with the Americans. They're defending Korea against the Americans and stuff like that. Without external tension, there's no reason for North Korea to be, just like East Germany disappeared.
How seriously do you take the nuclear threat from North Korea? What do you reckon their capability is?
Somewhere between 5 and 10 weapons with somewhere between 5 and 10 kilotons each. That's about half the size of the weapon that was dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. That is enough to kill several 100,000 South Koreans. Would be a genuine humanitarian catastrophe, but I do not believe it is significant for the military balance. I do believe that the South Koreans, even without American assistance and even with North Korean nuclear use, would still win the war, which is why I think a conflict is very unlikely.
And do you think North Korea has the delivery capacity to hit significant targets in South Korea?
I think they can probably hit Seoul, but I don't know if they can hit the rest of the country. They do, from what we know, I mean, we believe, right? I mean, they don't tell us very much, so it's hard to know, and they lie frequently. But what we think is that they have the ability to hit a fair amount of South Korea and Japan in terms of range. The question is whether or not they actually have the targeting systems to actually get a missile in place, right? I mean, if it falls in the ocean, it won't do nearly as much damage, and that's what people really worry about. Can they or wonder about? Can they target? And I'm skeptical.
And where do you see the Chinese government in this? I mean, after all, North Korea is a client state of theirs, and it's a strategic goal of China to keep Korea divided.
Yeah, that's right. It is a strategic goal for China is to actually prevent unification. I mean, no one actually wants to say that because the Chinese are formally committed to unification in Korea as they are with Taiwan in their own case, but really they don't want it. And so the North Koreans the Chinese kind of look away when the North Koreans do these things. They don't actually rein in the North Koreans. And this really falls on China, right? Because China is the one paying North Korea's bills. And if the Chinese don't step in, the North Koreans just don't feel like they have to stop. And that's why we have these kinds of things every few years. The ball is really in China's court, and I think the Chinese don't like that much.
But would you read the mood of Beijing at the moment being that they're happy for this situation to continue as is?
No, I don't think they actually want this. I think that the Chinese actually have a very hard time disciplining North Korea or getting leverage over it. In fact, I think one of the reasons, this isn't often discussed, but I think one of the primary reasons why North Korea actually built nuclear weapons was to deter Chinese political influence. North Korea is becoming something like an economic colony of China. It's so poor, it's so bankrupt. I've been to North Korea. I mean, once you leave the capital, it looks pretty bad. So they're very dependent economically on China, but nuclear weapons are a way for them to prevent political domination. They may be economically dependent, but they will not become East Germany and dominated.
Dr. Kelly, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Busan.
Well, this is Bolton & Co. Still to come before 2. Adam will speak to the former Conservative MP and